Welcome back, everyone. We're diving deep into a dark part of history today, the 1994 Rwandan genocide.
A complex and tragic event.
Absolutely. But we're not just looking back at what happened, we're going deeper, exploring the experiences of Romeo Dallaire.
Right, the force commander of the UN peacekeeping mission in Rwanda, UNAMIR.
We're lucky enough to have excerpts from Dallaire's memoir, Shake Hands with the Devil. It's a tough read, no doubt. Dallaire witnessed unimaginable brutality firsthand.
Raw and powerful. Definitely not sugarcoating the horrors he lived through.
Definitely not. But this isn't just about reliving a tragedy, it's about understanding. What can we learn from Dallaire's experiences? What does it tell us about peacekeeping, about global responsibility, about our own roles in preventing such atrocities?
Dallaire's story really underscores the importance of context. To truly grasp the Rwandan genocide, we need to understand the historical tensions, the personalities involved. We need to understand who Dallaire was, what shaped him.
His life before Rwanda is fascinating in itself. His father, a career military man, instilled in him a strong sense of duty. But there's this interesting twist. His dad also believed the soldiers shouldn't expect thanks for serving. Imagine carrying that weight.
A thankless duty, yet so crucial. And that's not all. Dallaire grew up bridging cultural divides. It seemed to come naturally to him, navigating different perspectives. It's almost like a foreshadowing of what he'll face in Rwanda.
He wasn't just a soldier, he was a thinker, a mediator. At the Royal Military College, he was known for his ability to bring people together, the French and English-speaking cadets. He was always the bridge between them.
That ability to see multiple viewpoints to find common ground, it's central to understanding the Rwandan genocide itself. The historical baggage, the deep-seated resentments, they can't be ignored.
Exactly. We can't just jump into 1994 without understanding the roots of the conflict. Rwanda gained independence in '62, but the transition wasn't peaceful. The Hutu majority took power, and that led to decades of violence and oppression against the Tutsi population. And this is where the Rwandan Patriotic Front, the RPF, comes into play. They weren't just refugees. They were organized, determined to fight for their homeland.
Years of resentment building. It was a powder keg waiting to explode. And Dallaire knew this when he landed in Kigali in 1993. He wasn't walking into a history lesson. He was walking into a pressure cooker.
Absolutely. The tension was palpable.
And his mission, to oversee the implementation of the Arusha Peace Accords, meant to end the Civil War. Talk about pressure.
The Arusha Accords, a fragile hope for peace, a chance, however slim, to mend a broken nation. And here's Dallaire, tasked with making it work.
He dove right in. Typical Dallaire. Met with both sides, assessed the military capabilities, got a feel for the political landscape. He even sensed this cautious optimism among the Rwandan people.
A glimmer of hope.
Right. But then there's this chilling anecdote in his book. Dallaire talks about the official calendar poster for that year.
The one with him shaking hands with Rwandan President Habyarimana.
Yeah, that one. Underneath the UN and Rwandan flags, meant to symbolize peace, unity. It's almost eerie looking back.
A haunting reminder of the hope that was shattered.
Dallaire himself sensed the cracks beneath the surface, even early on. The distrust between the Hutu and Tutsi factions was palpable. You could cut the tension with a knife.
And then those early warning signs start popping up. The emergence of extremist groups, the Interahamwe, the Hutu militia. Dallaire was getting intel, and it wasn't good. They were gaining power, amassing weapons, their rhetoric growing more and more violent.
So this wasn't just leftover tension. There was a deliberate plan in motion.
It's chilling to think about. Dallaire even uncovered information about these hidden weapons caches hidden all over the country.
He knew time was running out.
He tried to raise the alarm.
He sent urgent messages to the UN pleading for reinforcements. He needed a broader mandate, one that would allow him to seize those weapons, to intervene, to stop the violence before it escalated.
Those early pleas for help. They're heartbreaking to read, knowing what we know now.
Dallaire was on the ground, seeing the writing on the wall. And the world, or at least the part that could have done something, hesitated.
The UN, still reeling from Somalia and Bosnia, they were afraid of another failure, afraid of appearing to take sides. What they didn't grasp was that by not acting, they were already part of the equation.
So this idea of neutrality, of not getting involved, it backfired spectacularly.
It did. And as we know, that hesitancy had devastating consequences. The powder keg Dallaire had warned about, it was about to explode.
And explode it did. On the night of April 6, 1994, President Habyarimana's plane was shot down, killing everyone on board. The assassination still shrouded in mystery today.
Who gave the order? Who actually fired the missile?
We still don't have definitive answers, but what is clear, frighteningly clear, is that this was the trigger.
The catalyst. The match that lit the fuse. Within hours of that plane hitting the ground, the genocide began. Roadblocks everywhere, manned by Hutu militia. They were systematically hunting down and killing anyone suspected of being Tutsi, anyone who dared oppose them. It was a well-organized campaign of terror.
It's horrifying. Reading Dallaire's account in Shake Hands with the Devil, those early days, he describes driving through Kigali, the fear, the bodies. It's gut-wrenching.
Unimaginable.
He was thrust into this chaotic, violent situation, trying to make sense of it, trying to protect innocent lives with practically nothing.
He was outmatched, outgunned. He had a small, lightly armed UN force facing this tidal wave of violence.
What were the immediate challenges he faced, just in terms of trying to establish some kind of order?
Well, for starters, the Rwandan telephone system. Sabotaged. Communication was a nightmare. Dallaire was practically cut off from his own troops, unable to get a clear picture of what was happening.
So he's essentially blind and trying to fight back with one arm tied behind his back.
It was utter chaos. And on top of that, he's got pressure coming from both sides. The RPF saw him as an extension of the Hutu government.
And the Hutu extremists.
They saw UNAMIR as a nuisance, an obstacle.
Talk about a no-win situation.
It's remarkable that he was able to function at all under that pressure. He worked tirelessly, setting up communication lines, negotiating safe passage for civilians, securing the airport for evacuations and aid.
It's incredible, frankly, that he achieved anything at all.
Sheer will. And let's not forget the psychological burden. Dallaire and his troops, they were witnessing horrific acts day after day. They were operating on fumes, facing constant threats. It's a testament to Dallaire's leadership that he was able to hold his force together.
He managed to establish those safe zones, providing refuge for thousands of terrified civilians. And incredibly, he even convinced some moderate Hutu leaders to work with UNAMIR, trying to stop the killings.
A glimmer of humanity in a very dark time. But here's the thing. While Dallaire was fighting this losing battle in Kigali, the world, the international community, they remained largely silent. Silent. More like complicit. The UN Security Council, instead of authorizing reinforcements or giving Dallaire the mandate he desperately needed, they voted to actually reduce the size of UNAMIR.
I don't even have words. People are being systematically slaughtered and the world turns its back.
It was a collective failure of epic proportions. And it wasn't just the UN. Dallaire recounts instances where countries focused on evacuating their own citizens.
Like the French. They launched Operation Amaryllis to get their people out.
Right. And while you can understand wanting to protect your own citizens, it sent a clear message to the Rwandans. You're on your own.
Abandonment.
Then there's the Belgian contingent, a key part of UNAMIR initially. But after 10 Belgian peacekeepers were brutally murdered, they pulled out.
That must have been devastating for Dallaire, on a personal level and strategically.
Absolutely. The loss of those troops, combined with the UN's decision to downsize, it left Dallaire with a skeleton crew. But even facing abandonment, he never gave up on the people he was there to protect.
He negotiated ceasefires, secured the release of hostages. Small victories, but victories nonetheless.
There's this story in Shake Hands with the Devil that really highlights the impossible choices Dallaire was facing. A Hutu priest offered to lead him to a hidden weapons cache.
That's exactly the kind of intel he needed.
Exactly. A chance to disrupt the genocide. But
there's always a but.
The priest wanted Dallaire to guarantee his family's safety in exchange.
Oh, wow. What did he do?
Dallaire refused. He couldn't compromise the mission's integrity, even for a chance to save lives. It tormented him, but it speaks volumes about his character.
An impossible choice. So as the genocide raged on, the RPF, under Paul Kagame's leadership, they started gaining ground, determined to end the Hutu government's reign of terror. Dallaire, recognizing this shift in power, urged the RPF to prioritize securing safe zones for civilians over all-out war.
He knew a swift RPF victory would likely lead to reprisals against the Hutus. He was trying to break that cycle of violence.
But Kagame, after years of fighting, he wasn't going to let this opportunity slip away.
Right. He had his own people to protect, his own score to settle. It's a tragedy. Two sides, both with legitimate grievances, both fighting for what they believed in, but finding common ground in that inferno, nearly impossible.
By July 1994, the RPF had taken Kigali, effectively ending the genocide. But the cost, unimaginable. An estimated 800,000 people slaughtered, in just 100 days.
100 days. It's hard to fathom.
It really is. So as we try to process the sheer scale of this tragedy, Dallaire's impossible struggle, the question becomes, what can we learn from this? How do we make sure this never happens again?
Those are the questions that haunted Dallaire long after he left Rwanda. Shake hands with the devil. It's not just him recounting the genocide. It's a search for answers, a call to action.
Let's dig into those answers then. Where do we even begin to unpack something this monumental?
Dallaire himself is very clear on one crucial lesson: early intervention. The international community dragged their feet, hesitated, and that hesitation, that delay, allowed the violence to spiral into genocide.
It's like that saying, right? A stitch in time saves 9.
Exactly. If only someone had stepped in, put out the fire when it was still small. Months before the genocide, Dallaire was sending those desperate warnings. Remember those intelligence reports? The hate radio, the malicious training out in the open.
All the signs were there.
But the world hesitated, paralyzed by the complexities of the situation, worried about repeating past mistakes. And the cost of that hesitation, as we know, was astronomical.
Is it fair to say that a different approach, a more proactive response, could have changed things?
Dallaire firmly believed so. He maintained that even a relatively small force, properly equipped and crucially authorized to act decisively, could have made all the difference. Imagine if he'd been able to seize those weapons caches to intervene at the first sign of organized violence.
Instead, he was stuck operating within a traditional peacekeeping model, which we now know was completely inadequate for a situation like this.
Traditional peacekeeping assumes a shared commitment to peace, but the architects of the Rwandan genocide, they had no interest in peace. They were planning mass murder.
So how do we bridge that gap? How do we adapt peacekeeping to these horrific but very real possibilities?
Dallaire became a vocal advocate for a more robust approach, one that empowers peacekeepers to act proactively, prevent violence, disarm militias, protect civilians, even if it means using force. Not just peacekeeping, peacemaking.
So peacekeepers who can actually enforce peace, not just watch as it crumbles around them.
Exactly. But it requires a huge shift in mindset from the international community. We can't be afraid to take a stand against those who are actively committing genocide. Neutrality in the face of such evil is.
It's almost a form of complicity, isn't it?
You could say that. And Rwanda tragically proved that the cost of inaction is far, far greater than the risk of getting involved. Dallaire's story, as difficult as it is to grapple with, it's a plea for a different future. It forces us to ask ourselves, what responsibility do we have? As individuals, I mean.
It's easy to feel powerless when faced with this kind of horror.
We are not powerless. We have voices. We can learn about the warning signs of genocide. We can push our governments to take a stand, to support peacekeeping missions that actually have teeth. We can hold perpetrators accountable.
And support organizations working in post-conflict zones, right? Promoting peace and reconciliation. There are avenues for action.
Exactly. Dallaire's story, tragic as it is, it's a call to action. We can't be bystanders. We have to do our part, each and every one of us, to create a world where Rwanda never happens again.
We can honor those who were lost by demanding better from our leaders, by taking action ourselves however we can.
One of the most enduring takeaways from Dallaire's story, I think, is this. Never underestimate the power of courage, of compassion, even in the face of pure evil. Dallaire saw the worst of humanity, but he never lost faith in the possibility of a better world.
Neither should we. As you go about your day, ask yourself, what will you do? How will you make sure that the memory of those who died in Rwanda fuels positive change?
Even small acts, multiplied across the globe, they can make a difference. It's something to think about. Until next time.